Colourful hydrangeas lead us into Portmeirion, Wales. A single honeysuckle adds its colour to the day. Portmeirion is a Welsh folly tourist village designed and built by Sir Clough Williams-Ellis. At the entrance, the former toll house. Once through the toll house, you enter the village via the gatehouse. Williams-Ellis built Portmeirion as a tribute to the atmosphere of the Mediterranean. Constructed over 50 years, it is now owned by a charitable trust. Flowers and plants abound in the village. The Campanile, built in 1928. From the piazza we see a gilded Thai dancer, and many of the attractive buildings at Portmeirion. A building and statue of an eagle at Battery Square. The Chantry. The Pantheon, also called the Green Dome. The Chantry again, looking down into the piazza. Battery Square. Sweeping across the piazza. And ending with the view of the Chantry again. Buddha at rest, well sheltered from the English weather. Crocosmia lucifer with its bold red flowers. Many of the buildings are available for rent by holidaymakers. This block is called Salutation. Stairway up to the rental apartment. It also incorporates a tea room and a gift shop. A view across the piazza towards the Pantheon from in front of Salutation. Across the piazza, up in the forest, is the gazebo. Telford's Tower, available to rent as a holiday let. The Town Hall, with a coronet atop its tower. A close-up view of the Town Hall. A statue to Hercules, a hero from Greek and Roman mythology, who is famous for his strength and for his numerous far-ranging adventures. Looking up one of the pathways in the piazza to the green dome of the Pantheon. Behind these walls, the piazza. This is the piazza. We gain entry to the piazza through this narrow walkway. The buildings of Portmeirion blend seamlessly with the beautiful gardens. You should not pass a wishing well without making a wish and tossing in a coin to make it come true. A sweep across the piazza shows just a little bit of what Portmeirion has to offer the visitor. My imagination had me staying in the chantry, until I remembered all those steps. The Gothic Pavilion. Nothing really much here though. Little mix of oddities to be found at Portmeirion. Scenes from lunchtime. There was a great range of food, and the choice we made was excellent. Our little blue tit visitor thought so too. Looking down the street on which the town hall stands. Flowers, flowers, and more flowers. The Dolphin Terrace. Again, that downside of Portmeirion. Everywhere it's stairways. I don't think that the fireplace below this chimney has been used in a very, very long time. An attractive circular wrought iron design on one of the windows at the town hall. I think the glass that gives this wonderful watercolor painting look is handmade. A peek down to the estuary of the River Dwirid. On the shoreline, a Welsh flag streams in the breeze, looking back from the River Dwirid towards Portmeirion, then turning to see the observatory and part of the coastal path. The lighthouse. Time to turn away from the estuary and go inland following the tree trail, where there are trees that have grown into some strange shapes. Others have had to be cut, probably for public safety. I imagine this to be home to some small forest creature. We will take the path to the Chinese lake. A pagoda at the edge of the lake is within sight of another one higher up in the trees. It's time to head for home. We've had a grand day out in Portmeirion and can really recommend it. Out through the gatehouse as rain clouds gather around us. To arrive back at our caravan certified location, where just 2 caravans out of the 5 permitted are there to see this rainbow.